Testing, 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 testing.
Mic check 1 2 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check. Excellent. And mic check 1 2 1 2 1 2.
Good morning. Welcome to the Heritage Foundation and our Douglas and Sarah Allison Auditorium. We, of course, welcome those who are joining us on our heritage.org website on all of these occasions. For those in-house, we would ask that last courtesy to see that your mobile devices have been silenced or turned off. And for those watching online, you're welcome to send questions or comments at any time, simply emailing speaker@heritage.org. Leading our discussion today is Paul Rosenzweig, who is a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. He is also the founder of Red Branch Consulting, a Homeland Security consulting company, as well as a senior advisor to the Chertoff Group. He serves as a professional lecturer in law at George Washington University, and he is an advisor to and former member of the American Bar Association's Standing Committee on Law and National Security, as well as a contributing editor to the Lawfare blog. Please join me in welcoming Paul Rosenzweig. Paul?
Thank you very much, John. It's great to be here. It is an honor to be asked to host today's event. I want to welcome you to the Heritage Allison Auditorium for our discussion today about immigration. Immigration has had a storied history in American life, beginning, of course, back with the founding and continuing to this day. It has, in many instances and times, been a contentious subject. If we think about immigration, we could probably identify three basic themes that have animated the debate. Some look at immigration and see it through the prism of commerce. They see borders as controls on the free flow of goods and labor, and they see immigration issues as ways of resolving what, if any, should be the appropriate way of managing the flow of labor across borders. Others look at immigration and see it principally through the prism of cultural significance. A nation is, of course, defined by those who live within it, and border control and immigration control more or less allows a country to define who its citizens are, who may be within the country, and thus define the nature of the culture that that nation expresses. The third prism is one of security, national security and personal security. They see borders as defining a defensible space and immigration as a way of enforcing that defense to the betterment of the national commonweal. It is, I think, fair to characterize the debate between these prisms of immigration as an ongoing one. Certainly since the last substantive immigration reform in Congress in the 1980s, we as Americans have been engaged in a vigorous debate as to which of these conceptions of immigration takes prominence. The Obama administration is rightly, I think, characterized as having leaned heavily on questions of commerce and culture, advancing them over issues of national security. And the Trump administration is, I think, also rightly seen as reversing some of those trends and putting a greater emphasis today on national security issues as they relate to immigration and border security. The structure of our discussion today is going to be very simple. We're going to begin with a short panel discussion with two of my colleagues from Heritage, and follow that with a keynote address from Tom Homan, who I will introduce at a later moment. For now, let me introduce my two colleagues. David and Sarah, to the far end, is a policy analyst here in the Heritage Foundation Allison Center for Foreign and National Security Policy. He specializes in homeland security issues, including cyber and immigration policy, and the protection of critical infrastructure. David joined Heritage in 2012. He holds a BA in Government and Economics from the College of William & Mary and a Master's in Public Policy from George Mason. Sitting closer to me is Hans von Spakovsky, who is an authority on a wide range of issues, including civil rights, civil justice, the First Amendment, immigration, and the rule of law. He's a senior legal fellow in the Heritage Foundation Edwin Meese III Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. He is the co-author with John Fund of the book, Who's Counting? How Fraudsters and Bureaucrats Put Your Vote at Risk, and Obama's Enforcer, Eric Holder's Justice Department. Before joining Heritage in 2008, Hans served 2 years as a member of the Federal Election Commission, the authority charged with enforcing campaign finance laws for congressional and presidential elections. Let's begin with you, David, with some introductory remarks.
Thanks, Paul. Today I just want to focus a little bit on some of the problems, some of the issues around immigration enforcement, especially from the perspective of DHS, and also provide some solutions along the way. And then I know Hans will be able to talk a little bit more about what's going on from the DOJ side of things and what's going on with state and localities around the country. DHS has many responsibilities on the border and regarding immigration, but two notable ones I want to point out today and spend my time on. First is border security and interior enforcement. I'll start with border security because it just seems most appropriate to start from the outside and work our way in. Border security gets a lot of talk in the United States. Border barriers, walls, the number of Border Patrol agents, cameras, technology, etc. These are the types of things that we've often heard during campaigns and we hear now. And it makes sense that we should talk about these things. It makes sense that the control of one's borders is really the start to good enforcement. After all, if you don't know who's entering the country, it only makes subsequent enforcement efforts that much more difficult. Currently, the United States has around 654 miles of fencing on the southern border. That might be going up, of which around 354 are pedestrian fencing and 300 miles are vehicle fencing. Only about 37 miles have a second layer of fencing, so 2 layers of fencing in the same place. In terms of staffing, at the end of 2016, FY 2016, the Border Patrol agents patrol had around just under 20,000 agents. And so while there are many important arguments regarding more agents, additional barriers, or other things, I think it's critical, especially at this event talking about immigration enforcement, to step back and see how border security investments are part of a larger enforcement system. Fencing, barriers, walls, these may dissuade some illegal immigrants from crossing into the United States, but in many cases, border security alone is not enough of a deterrent. That is, many illegal immigrants are going to cross the border illegally if they think that once they get past the border, they are going to be allowed to stay. In many areas of the border that are mountainous or desert regions, or where there's many miles to the nearest town, a border barrier, a border wall, is just a sort of several-minute short delay in what otherwise is going to be a several-hour or day-long trek to get to a city or town. And so the best way to stop this illegal immigration happening in these areas is to intercept these folks at the border using technology. Technology is essential to finding these people and directing Border Patrol agents to pick them up in those areas. Where border barriers and other walls and fencing are most essential are in those areas near towns and cities. In these areas, illegal immigrants can cross the border and quickly disappear or melt into the regular hustle and bustle of people, houses, and businesses. In these urban and suburban areas, those extra few minutes that are gained that it takes an illegal immigrant to cross the border because of the barrier is an essential period of time needed for the Border Patrol to detect the illegal border crossing and get agents there to be able to respond and stop them. Thus, the best border security is built around technology and border barriers that are tailored to the regional needs, and that looks different in different places on the border. This is the approach that has been endorsed by former Secretary of Homeland Security John Kelly, who has testified that his recommendations would be that, quote, a wall makes sense here, fencing, high-tech fencing makes sense over there, technology makes sense over there. A needs-driven, cost-effective approach to border security is the right path forward. But I want to move beyond border security. This is mostly an immigration enforcement event. We have, and the reason why I want to move beyond just border security is because I actually view the most important part of this enforcement puzzle as the interior enforcement being done by ICE. And that's actually, I'm very excited to have the ICE director here because I really do view this as the key question. When an immigrant is picked up by the Border Patrol, what happens? When they get past the Border Patrol or they overstay a legal visa, what happens? I would argue that these questions are some of the most important questions that we need to answer in this debate. If an individual believes that once they get past the border, they are unlikely to be deported, then fences and the Border Patrol are just small obstacles into what is otherwise a safe interior of the United States for them. Even worse, if an illegal immigrant believes they can just turn themselves in at the border and get sent into the U.S. interior, well, then they will definitely view a trip to the United States as having a high likelihood of success. All the investments we will have done in border security and in the Border Patrol then ultimately are just sadly facilitating the movement of those illegal immigrants into the interior of the United States, if we continue the policy also known as catch and release. And so border security must be backed up by other parts of the immigration system. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, as well as parts of the Departments of Justice. Truly powerful border security will include more space, funding, and authority for these agencies so that illegal immigrants can have their cases adjudicated quickly in an expedited manner where possible. This ensures that most illegal immigrants are not being released into the interior, but being removed as quickly as possible so as to not overwhelm the immigration courts. For immigrants that do make it into the interior, though, either by crossing the border or by overstaying a legal visa, interior enforcement is necessary to back up these efforts at the border. It is not enough to make it difficult to enter the United States. It also must be difficult for an illegal immigrant to remain and work in the United States unlawfully. When found, illegal immigrants should be subject to removal through all the tools that we have at our disposal, and perhaps more that we should give to ICE. This includes increasing the use of expedited removal, which I know that the Trump administration has already started to do, expanding the 287G program, which trains and deputizes state and local law enforcement to help enforce our federal immigration laws, and properly improving and increasing workplace enforcement. Unfortunately, the Obama administration did the opposite. Enforcement was significantly weakened, I would argue, under the Obama administration, which through various executive actions reduced the number of individuals being deported. In fiscal year 2016, DHS removed or returned 450,000 individuals. In FY 2008, about 1.2 million enforcement actions occurred. So 2016 is the lowest levels of removals and returns since 1971. And as I've mentioned, the policy of the Obama administration was largely to catch, when some people were caught at the border, was to allow them to be released into the interior. The result is that we have average wait times in our immigration courts that have tripled under the Obama administration. I think it's upwards of 2 years now for a court date in the immigration court system. And together with the unlawful and unconstitutional deferred action programs known as DACA and DAPA that rewarded and encouraged more illegal immigration, the Obama administration failed to ensure that proper enforcement was occurring and failed to deter more illegal immigration. Thankfully, the Trump administration has begun to reverse many of these policies, and it is critical that it continue to move forward in this area so as to deter additional illegal immigration and reduce the number of illegal immigrants currently in the United States. I'm looking forward to hearing the director's remarks on this and to see what the administration will be doing moving forward. And I'll just close with this and say that there's also an important discussion here that's to be had regarding the importance of the legal immigration system and how it can be structured to help deter illegal immigration and incentivize legal immigration. But that's beyond the scope of my time here today, and so I just wanted to throw that out there as something else that could be a whole other event, but that's also an important piece of this puzzle. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Hans?
There were two papers that were handed out for the people in the audience who came in. I just want to quickly mention them. One is a paper that I actually wrote a couple of years ago, and it's on the steps that states can legally take, given the Supreme Court's decisions, to assist the federal government in enforcement of our immigration laws. And it's very, very important for the states to do that. Without their assistance, it's very tough for the Department of Homeland Security to do its job. And there are a lot of things that they can do, so I'd urge you to take a look at that. And then the second paper is one I just released and wrote about how the immigration courts should be streamlined. I don't think a lot of people realize that illegal aliens have very extensive due process rights, everything from the ability to be represented by counsel to most of the same rights that all of us enjoy as citizens when we're in the courts. But there are a lot of things that could be done to streamline the court system. What I'm going to do is I'm going to concentrate on probably what is one of the biggest fights still going on in the courts, and that is sanctuary cities. Now let me first say, that this false claim is constantly made that if you are against illegal immigration, if you want to see our immigration laws enforced, then you must be racist. That is simply not true. No nation can exist if it doesn't control its borders. And we are the most generous country in the world when it comes to legal immigration. We take in 1 million legal immigrants a year. That's more than any other country in the world. Actually, I think the best statement on this was made by Barbara Jordan. Barbara Jordan was a civil rights icon, I think one of the first African Americans elected to the Texas legislature. Then she went on to Congress, and in the 1990s, Bill Clinton put her in charge of his commission on immigration reform. And she said this: "We disagree with those who would label efforts to control immigration as being inherently anti-immigrant. It is both a right and a responsibility for a democratic society to manage immigration so it serves the national interest. Unless this country does a better job in curbing illegal immigration, we risk irreparably undermining our commitment to legal immigration." Now, the biggest fight that's going on in the courts and otherwise is on sanctuary cities, because the Trump administration has, I think very correctly, through Attorney General Jeff Sessions, said that they are going to not allow cities and counties that have sanctuary policies in place that obstruct enforcement of federal immigration laws to apply for and receive discretionary grants from the Department of Justice. Now, what are sanctuary policies? In essence, the sanctuary policies that cities and counties like San Francisco and Chicago have put in do two things. One, they forbid their local law enforcement from exchanging any information with the federal government on the immigration status of individuals they arrest for committing local crimes. And second, they refuse to honor federal detainer warrants. Federal detainer warrants are issued by the Department of Homeland Security when they learn that local law enforcement has arrested a criminal illegal alien and asks them to hold them for 48 hours so that the feds can come and pick them up. Now, forbidding local law enforcement from exchanging information with the feds is illegal under federal law. There's a federal provision in immigration law that basically says that no local entity can forbid its officials from exchanging citizenship information. So when the city of Chicago tells its law enforcement, you can't notify DHS when you've arrested an illegal alien for a local crime such as rape, sexual assault, burglary, that is against federal law. And we know that that is legal because when that law was first passed, the city of New York, under its former mayor, Rudy Giuliani, sued and said that the feds couldn't do this. This law was unconstitutional because it commandeered local resources. In a case that went all the way to the Second Circuit, U.S. Court of Appeals in 1999, the Second Circuit threw out the city of New York's case. And they said that this law doesn't commandeer local resources because it does. The federal government isn't telling cities that you have to call the feds. They're just saying you can't tell your local sheriff that he's forbidden from calling the feds if he wants to notify them or to get information about someone they've arrested. Now, look, we're having a legal discussion here and we're having a public policy discussion, but I got to tell you on a personal note that I get really annoyed and frankly tired of local officials and the sanctimonious attitude they take as if they are on the moral high ground with their sanctuary policies. Because I got to tell you, what they are doing is creating sanctuaries for criminals. They are saying that if an illegal alien commits a local crime, let's say robbery or assault, and they are sentenced to 6 months in the local jail, at the end of that time, they would rather that that criminal be released back into the local community where they can victimize more individuals. That's better than calling up the Department of Homeland Security so that DHS can come pick them up and remove them from the country. And are Americans victimized by this? Yes, they are. In 2005, the Government Accountability Office did a study and released a report And what they did is they looked at the criminal histories of 55,322 illegal aliens who were in federal, state, and local prisons. These were individuals who were entered the country illegally and were in the country illegally when they committed their crimes. These 55,000 illegal aliens were arrested almost 460,000 times. They'd committed almost 700,000 criminal offenses, averaging 13 per alien. And they weren't in jail for immigration crimes. 12% were for violent crimes such as murder, robbery, assault, and sex-related crimes. 15% were for burglary, larceny, theft, and property damage. None of these crimes would have occurred if these individuals were not in the United States, and many of them would not have occurred if, after they had served their sentence for committing this crime in a local jurisdiction, DHS had been called and they had been removed from the country. In 2011, GAO did an updated study, looked at 251,000 criminal illegal aliens. They were arrested 1.7 million times for committing 3 million criminal offenses. The second policy, the refusal to honor detainer warrants, there's two things about this that you all should realize. First of all, these local jurisdictions are treating illegal aliens better than they are U.S. citizens. And what I mean by that is, look, if you're stopped on the side of the road by a state trooper because you're speeding, I don't want to embarrass anybody in the room by asking how many of you that has happened to. It has happened to me. What does the state trooper do after you hand him your driver's license? Well, he goes back to his car and he checks to make sure it's a valid license. He checks to see if there's an arrest warrant for you in the state where you've been stopped. But the other thing he does is he checks the NCIC system. This is the National Crime Information System maintained by the FBI. And states put their arrest warrants into it, the federal government puts their arrest warrants into it, and if I'm stopped in the state of Virginia for speeding and there's an arrest warrant for me out in California, I'm not just going to get a speeding ticket, I'm going to be detained so that California officials can come and make arrangements to pick me up. Same thing if there's a federal warrant on me. And yet sanctuary cities are saying that if there's a federal detainer warrant on me because I'm an illegal alien, they're not going to honor that. That is the reason why Kate Steinle is dead. I'm sure you all have heard her name. She's the young woman who was murdered by an illegal alien in San Francisco just a couple of years ago. She is dead directly because of the city of San Francisco's sanctuary policy. The illegal alien who killed her was in jail. He was a 7-time prior felon. A detainer warrant was filed with the city of San Francisco by DHS asking that they be notified before he be released. The city of San Francisco decided not to press drug charges against him. They also decided not to honor the detainer warrant. Therefore, they released him and he was killed. What's so tragic about this is that that's not the first time that's happened in San Francisco. In 2008, another family, the Bologna family, had their father and 2 teenage sons killed, shot, by an MS-13 gang member who had been arrested and convicted twice previously, once for a gang-related assault and the attempted robbery of a pregnant woman. And in both instances, San Francisco, because of their sanctuary policy, refused to notify DHS, so he wasn't picked up, and so he was in the streets of San Francisco able to kill 3 members of this family directly because of the sanctuary policy of the city of San Francisco. If they had informed DHS, this would not have happened. Let me end very quickly with one other story which tells the results of when locals and states refuse to assist the federal government and try to obstruct enforcement of federal immigration laws. Another alien named Zion Jara was in the U.S. illegally because he had entered as a tourist. Then he became a student without changing his immigration status, and then they overstayed his tourist visa. He was detainable and deportable from almost the first moment he was in the U.S. At 12:09 on a Saturday morning, he was stopped by a Maryland state trooper for driving 90 miles an hour. The trooper neither asked him any questions about his immigration status, nor did he check with the federal government's Law Enforcement Support Center. The Law Enforcement Support Center is maintained by DHS. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that law enforcement officials can call DHS and check the immigration status of individuals they detain and arrest. If the state trooper had contacted this center, they would have informed him that he was illegally in the U.S. and he could have been detained, picked up by DHS, and removed from the country. Instead, because Maryland doesn't participate in this, the trooper gave him a $270 speeding ticket and let him go. That ticket was found in the glove compartment of his car at Newark Airport 2 days later after he flew United Airlines Flight 93 into the ground in Pennsylvania. But that is a direct result of that state's refusal to assist the federal government. I will end with this. Critics of pro-enforcement policy say it's anti-immigrant, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Favoring the rule of law isn't mean-spirited or racist. It's the very foundation of what the U.S. Is founded on, and it's the core of why Americans welcome immigrants. I will end with this statement, again, from Barbara Jordan. This sums up what our immigration policy should be. Credibility in immigration policy can be summed up in one sentence. Those who should get in, get in. Those who should be kept out are kept out. And those who should not be here will be required to leave. Thanks.
Thanks, Hans. I'm going to ask a couple of questions before, well, if there's time, we might take a couple of questions for the panel from the audience, but maybe we'll see how that goes. So let me start with you, David. Your discussion was rather critical of the Obama administration. Is there anything that the Obama administration did right? Are there things that they did that are worthy of praise that ought to be continued?
Yes, although it's a bit of a complicated one, but yes. One of the things that the Obama administration did was they started removing more people who were caught at the border, but this is a bit of a numbers game, it's a little bit of a shell game. Traditionally in the United States, when people were caught at the border, they were returned to their home country. Colloquially, most Americans would think of a return and a removal as the same thing. The person is being deported from the United States. But in the parlance of DHS, those are two different things, a return and a removal. Traditionally, immigrants caught at the border where most of them were returned. While arrests occurring in the interior of the United States, that resulted in removals, more or less. And that's not a hard and fast rule, but that's a rule of thumb. What President Obama started doing is he started removing more people who are caught at the border. And this is a good thing because people who are removed, if they re-enter the United States, there's a penalty attached to it. And so, thus, if you remove someone, there's probably disincentivizing them from coming back illegally. And the Obama administration held it up as saying, we're deporting lots of people, look at us, we're really good on enforcement. What was actually happening, though, is that they stopped removing people from the interior, and all those people who used to be returned were now being removed at the border, which is why the net sum of people being deported from the United States fell, but the total number of people being removed increased. But it was all sort of a shell game about where that was occurring and who that was applying to. So it was a good thing to remove more people who were caught at the border, but
because of the legal consequences.
Because of the legal consequences, but it's a bit of a shell game in terms of there's lots of other areas that were harmed at the same time.
Okay, fair enough. So Hans, I'm going to give you a magic wand that you may wave, and you may get Congress to pass and the President to sign any single change in immigration law that you wish. What is it?
I would actually do two things.
Oh no! I gave you one wand, but go ahead. I'll give you two wands.
Okay. Well, the first is I would make the E-Verify system mandatory. The biggest way to get large numbers of the illegal alien population in the United States to self-deport is to dry up their ability to work. And one of the ways to do that is to make E-Verify mandatory. That's what Arizona did on a state basis, and the Supreme Court upheld their ability to do it. But the second thing I would do is...
Why don't you explain what E-Verify is?
Sorry. The E-Verify system, look, if you want to get a job in the United States, your employer is required under federal immigration law to check your documents to make sure that, one, you're a U.S. citizen, therefore entitled to work, or that if you're a non-citizen, that you're legally in the country and that you have a work authorization to do that. The E-Verify system is a system set up at DHS. They can easily call and check with DHS to see if you are entitled to work in the United States, but it's a voluntary system. Like I said, the state of Arizona actually made it mandatory and said that any employers who, after using the E-Verify system, if they then knowingly and intentionally hire an illegal alien, they can lose their business license, which is the death knell for a corporation. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce sued over that. It went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court said it's perfectly legitimate for states to make the E-Verify system mandatory and to threaten the loss of a business license. That kind of a system throughout the United States would help dry up the jobs, which is what drives the large majority of people to come here illegally, and large people would self-deport if they can't earn money and send remittances back to their home country. The other thing that I would do is correct the misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment, which has caused the United States to legalize birthright citizenship. We are one of the few countries in the entire world that recognizes that. Only about a half dozen do. A few more that did have gotten rid of it. It makes no sense. It's a misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment. If one of your parents is a U.S. citizen, then of course you should be considered a U.S. citizen. But if both of your parents have come to this country illegally, it makes no sense and is a misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment to believe that you are a U.S. citizen.
David, do you want, I'll give you the wand. Do you want to use it?
If I were to use the wand, I would probably change some of the things along the lines of how state and local governments, some of the things that Hans was talking about, but also the 287G program, I would make that program so that you didn't require that DHS approve your entry into the program, but that if a state or local government wanted to help enforce federal immigration law, they would just be allowed to, and that DHS would have to, have a burden of proof on DHS to prove that that city or state couldn't comply with the terms of the program. And so let state and local governments who want to help, together with some of the other things along sanctuary cities that Hans has discussed.
Okay, so with the schedule I have, we have about 5 minutes more with the panel here before we're going to turn to the keynote address. I have lots of questions. That's why they asked me to do this, but I'm happy to open it up to anybody in the audience. Questions from the audience for either of the panelists. Would you wait for a microphone, please, and tell us who you are? Sir?
Good morning. My name is John Radman, and I'm a member of Heritage Foundation. And the question that I have is for Mr. Spakowski. And the question is really when an illegal alien is detained, in the interior, what are the bases or the law that gives them due process?
That's actually a very good question. And what the courts have said is that when the United States is going through the removal process to try to take someone out who's been detained, due process is the amount of due process they get is only what Congress decides to give them. I mean, that's basically what the court decisions have said. So to the extent that Congress wants to limit those due process rights, Congress has the ability to do it. And that's why, for example, Congress some years ago said that aliens being removed, illegal aliens being removed, have the ability to go to immigration courts, which are administrative courts within the Department of Justice. They don't like the decision that a trial judge gives them, they can appeal it to the Board of Immigration Appeals. But their ability to go to the federal courts has been limited. They can't go to federal district courts. They can only go to federal courts of appeal. I don't see any reason for that. I think they get more than they should in the due process rights they're given in the immigration court system. And I think Congress, frankly, should take away the ability to go to federal courts of appeal, which are being flooded with a lot of meritless, frivolous appeals.
Hang on a second, just so everybody can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, the follow-up question is how many other countries provide that due process that the United States provides?
Well, there's a great difference in what they provide and don't. I think, again, the United States, in the same way it's one of the most generous countries in the world when it comes to legal immigration, is frankly quite generous in the due process rights it gives to illegal aliens. By the way, one of the best things the administration did was end the catch and release policy. The catch and release policy that the Obama administration had basically said that when an illegal alien was caught in the interior of the country, they would give them a date to appear before an immigration judge and then release them. You talk to border agents and others, they refer to the catch and release policy as the catch and run policy, because the long-term rate at which illegal aliens did not show up for their court hearings was over 40%. And there aren't any other courts in the country that have that kind of a non-appearance rate.
Actually, I was always amazed by that, and I wondered about the 60% who showed up.
Yeah.
No, I mean, seriously, from their perspective, it's a questionable decision. In the back, if you will wait for a microphone to come back to you.
Hi, thank you. Maria Espinoza with the Remembrance Project. One question we get, and this is for Hans, the question we get most often is, why do mayors of sanctuary cities get away with not enforcing laws? And can you speak to that a little bit, Hans, and explain why they are immune?
I really don't quite understand that at all. And I think part of it is the way they try to fool the residents of their cities. You know, they try to paint sanctuary policies as something that protects all of their residents, and they say a lot of things that frankly aren't true. Because really, these sanctuary policies, as I've pointed out, they really just protect criminal illegal aliens from being removed, from the federal government being notified about them. And I think there's a lot of fooling of the public going on in this situation.
So we'll take one more question down here in the front before we go to our changeover the panel. Sir?
Jack Martin, just a short comment and then a question. The short comment is with regard to giving the Obama administration the credit for the removals of the Mexicans. That program basically was started by the Bush administration, and Obama administration just gets the credit for continuing it. The question is, with regard to the issue of detainers and whether or not they have any legal standing, a judge in Oregon ruled that you couldn't hold people without having a court order to do so, and therefore it was illegal to be holding people under detainer requests. And the Obama administration agreed with the position that detainers were voluntary rather than legal. Would you agree with that?
No, I think that's a misinterpretation of the law. If the federal government has the ability to hold an illegal alien, I really don't see how it's suddenly illegal for a state or local government to hold an illegal alien at the request of the federal government. But the second part of this is, look, what DHS is asking, particularly, for example, and this has been made clear in the case going on in Chicago, where Chicago has sued, is that, look, they're asking that the federal government be notified 48 hours before the locals are going to release somebody. If an illegal alien is in jail for, let's say, burglary, and they're serving a 6-month sentence, how in the world is it a problem if the federal government says, look, 48 hours before you're going to release this alien, this criminal alien, for serving a 6-month sentence, so please notify us 48 hours before you would normally release him. How in the world can that be a problem? I mean, that just defies common sense that somehow that is a problem, and the city doesn't want to do that.
Well, with that, please join me in thanking our two panelists, David and Sarah and Hans von Spakovsky. We'll take a 30-second break as they exit stage left. So the genesis of this event was the wonderful opportunity that we had to invite to our podium one of the leaders in the Trump administration's immigration enforcement policy. I am deeply honored to be able to welcome to the Allison Auditorium Thomas D. Homan. Mr. Homan is the acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, sometimes known as ICE, which is the principal investigative agency of the Department of Homeland Security. He became acting director on January 30th, 2017. Since 2013, Mr. Homan has served as the Executive Associate Director of the ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations, ERO. Mr. Homan is a 33-year veteran of law enforcement and has nearly 30 years of immigration enforcement experience. He has served in numerous capacities in law enforcement, including, I was pleased to learn, as a police officer in my hometown of New York City. He has also served as a U.S. Border Patrol agent, a special agent with the former U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service, INS, which became part of ICE, as well as a supervisory special agent and deputy assistant director for investigations at ICE. Mr. Homan holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and received the Presidential Rank Award in 2015 for his exemplary leadership and extensive accomplishments in the area of immigration enforcement. Please join me in welcoming Thomas D. Homan.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the invite. People ask me why I do things like this because I want to get out here and send a message out to the public that what they're reading in the media is not accurate. So I spend a lot of time trying to set the record straight on what ICE does, and just as importantly, what we don't do. As the moderator spoke, I started in Border Patrol in 1984. So I worked the front line in Border Patrol for several years, then became a special agent. I investigated organizations that smuggled aliens in this country for 20 years. In the last 8 years, I was in charge of enforcement removal operations, which arrest aliens in the interior, the detention, and the removal. So I have worked the entire immigration life cycle. I'm not the smartest guy ever sitting in this chair. I'm the first cop to sit in this chair. I've done the job on the front line, and now I'm the acting director. I'm certainly proud to do that. I actually retired January 27th, about 3 hours. And on the way out of the ceremony, I got a call from General Kelly asking me that the president would like me to stay around the agency. And when the president asks you to serve, there's only one answer. So I'm back, serving my country as best I can. So, trying to send a message. Let me tell you what I read this morning. As soon as I came in the office, every morning I read the press clips. These are just a few of the press clips I read this morning. Migrant justice sues feds for information, claiming harassment. Man without a country deported by Trump administration. Top Trump official ordered ICE to portray immigrants as criminals. Rep. Smith and J. Paul are back in Seattle to talk about ending private immigration prisons. U.S. hauls in 100 Cambodians to be deported. In New Hampshire, Indonesian Christians caught in Trump immigration crackdown. ACLU, 18-year-old U.S. resident deported by heartless and ruthless Trump administration. Feds to certify passcode deputies and deal that will boost deportations. Family claims deception after ICE detains Denver father of 4. A Utah woman says she escaped severe abuse and violence in Guatemala, and now we're trying to send her back. That is racism. That's just a few of the headlines I had the pleasure of reading this morning. But you know what they don't say? They don't say every one of these people being removed had their due process in this country. They got an order from a federal judge issued from a bench, and ICE's job is to execute that order. If anybody in this room ignored a judge's order, what would happen to you? Well, they want to vilify the men and women for doing their job and executing a judge's order issued from a bench. Shame on these folks. For people to say that we're racist, white supremacists, people should be ashamed to ever wear the uniform for enforcing laws of this country. That's why I get emotional when I start talking, because the 20,000 men and women that work for ICE are American patriots. By the very fact they read this every day, they still strap a gun to their hip, leave the safety and welfare and security of their families and their homes to defend this country and support public safety, defend public safety, and get vilified for doing it. But they keep coming back day after day. I appreciate the invite to be here today. So, you know, every time I do anything, my staff gives them about 6 pages of things they want me to say, and I'll start this way, but I can guarantee you I'll get off on my tangents, which I think is meaningful, because I really do. I'm really passionate about what we do. I'm really passionate about getting the truth out to people on what ICE does. The Heritage Foundation has been a friend and advocate for the work we do, and on behalf of the 20,000 men and women who work for ICE, I want to thank you for this opportunity to be here and talk to you all today. I want to talk about ICE's enforcement priorities, what we do and what we don't do. My statements on the Hill have been talked about a lot. How dare Acting Director Holman say that aliens should be afraid? They should be looking over their shoulders. Well, if anybody in this room goes down the highway, I heard it earlier, if you go down the highway racing at 100 miles an hour, are you worried that you may get stopped and get a ticket? If you lie in your taxes, are you worried you may get an audit? People that knowingly and intentionally violate the laws of this country, enter this country illegally, which is a crime that's been lost in the last decade. When you commit a crime against this country, enter the country illegally, you should be worried. That's the way it's supposed to be. If we keep sending this message, it's okay to violate the laws of this country and go in society and not be worried about enforcement, then we're never going to solve the border crisis. It's never going to be solved as long as people think they get a free pass. This country, I heard a lot of good comments here by your panel. You know, this country is a very welcoming country. We have allowed millions of people to enter this country and become citizens and become, you know, part of our society because they did it the right way. And for the people that stand in line and do it this way, you got to admire them. There's a right way to come to this country and there's a wrong way to come to this country, and the wrong way is not acceptable. And this president has made that clear. If you enter this country illegally and hide or refuse an order or have a U.S. child and not be removed, you're never going to solve the border crisis. There's not another law enforcement agency in this country where people ask them not to enforce the laws. No one asks FBI, DEA, ATF, name it. Name a federal or state or local law enforcement agency where politicians say, don't enforce that law, don't take that law seriously. We enacted that law, and you're sworn to enforce that law, but ignore it. Not another agency is asked to do what ICE has been asked to do. This president made it clear. You know, he signed a series of executive orders, and it was a lot of paper and a lot of words and a lot of sentences. But he could have wrote in one. He could have did executive orders in one sentence. ICE will now enforce the laws enacted by Congress and on the books. We're not doing anything. We didn't create any new laws to enforce. This president has said, I'm taking the handcuffs off the law, taking them off the law enforcement officers. You can now enforce the laws on the books. That's what he's done. This country spends billions of dollars a year on border security, detention, immigration courts, attorneys, the appeals court, circuit courts. And at the end, if a judge issues a final order, they need to be executed. Because if they're not, there's absolutely no integrity in this entire system. Might as well just open the border up. What's the sense? If we're required to give someone due process, that great taxpayer expense, you give them due process. And a federal judge makes a decision. That decision needs to be held up. It needs to be executed by the men and women of ICE. So there's no integrity in the entire system. Why would anybody follow the rules and laws of this country if at the end you don't like the decision? Okay, well, forget about it. I get asked all the time, why do you arrest somebody who's been here for 10 years, 15 years with two U.S. citizen kids? Why? Because if we don't, and we continue to send the message, enter this country illegally, go hide in the shadows, have a U.S. citizen child, or actually go to immigration court, get an order, and ignore it. But if you have a U.S. citizen child by birth in this country, you're off the hook. The law means nothing to you. You are exempt from federal law. If that's the message we want to send, you're never going to solve the border crisis. If people think they can come to this country legally and have a U.S. citizen kid and that gets them off the hook, now they're immune from enforcement, you're never going to fix the border crisis. I've been doing this a long time, and we got to stop sending that message. You know, last week the administration laid out a set of reforms. You probably read it in the media. Those that like it, those that don't. But one thing is very inaccurate in the media is that the White House developed these priorities and policies, certain people that have a white supremacist agenda. These policies were written by career law enforcement officers. They weren't written by the White House. They ask us, they ask CIS, they ask CBP, and they ask ICE. Give us what you think you need to enforce the law in a meaningful way. We've already made great progress on the border this year under this president. His policies, whether you like this president or not, whether you like his policies or not, you can't argue with the results of what's going on the border right now. Historical lows. Why? Because we're enforcing the rule of law, and we're sending a strong message nobody's off the table. You'll get your due process. We'll give you that. But once the decision's been made, it will be enforced. So I want to make it clear that the priorities and policies sent to the Hill last week were created and written by career law enforcement officers, including myself. They asked my ideas and my staff, and we put together our wish list of priorities and policies. CBP did the same, CIS did the same. These priorities reflect the input of law enforcement professionals throughout the three organizations. And these reforms build upon the President's executive orders that laid the groundwork for serious immigration enforcement. This President takes public safety and border security very seriously, and thank God for that. The policies that we sent up were clear and concise, and from a law enforcement perspective, make sense. This President, this administration has finally allowed the ICE officers to do what they're supposed to do, enforce the laws. The fact of the matter is entering the country is legally, and there's no consequence for sneaking past the border, overstaying a visa, skipping immigration court, or even committing additional crimes on this country illegally. If we don't address them, then there's absolutely no integrity in the system. We'll never fix it. I've been around since 1984. I was actually here during 1986, or the last amnesty. You know, it's supposed to be the last time we did it. Did it work? No. As long as people think they can get into this country illegally and violate the laws of this country, and they can be immune from the law, we won't fix it. This president is fixing it. The numbers are historical low. We got to continue down this path. We're on the right path now. We need some more things to happen, which I'm going to talk about. But we've made significant progress this year under this president. Both the executive orders and recent priorities announced by the White House include much-needed measures to hold sanctuary cities accountable. Earlier this month, California's governor, you might have read, I responded to this quite heavily in the media, signed legislation making California a sanctuary state for illegal aliens, including those who have committed additional crimes. It's called SB 54. That bill nearly eliminates all cooperation and communication with our law enforcement partners. It voids the delegated authority of the 287G program that Orange County Sheriff's had with us. It prohibits local law enforcement from contracting with federal government to house detainees. And it refuses the law enforcement agency to contact us before they release a criminal to the street. Sanctuary policies like these are shielding criminal aliens from enforcement by refusing to honor our detainers or allow ICE access to interview aliens in the jails. I'll give you an example. Just 2 months ago in Sonoma County, California, a guy by the name of Neri Estrada Margos was arrested for felony domestic battery, triggering an alert to ICE because he's previously been deported to Guatemala. ICE filed a detainer. The Sonoma County Sheriff's Department released him on bail before ICE could respond. 2 weeks later, he murdered that girlfriend. Had we been given enough time to take custody of him, most likely he'd be in Guatemala. Every criminal alien gets released by sanctuary city that reoffends, has committed a crime that is preventable. I'll say it again. Sanctuary cities are releasing public safety threats back into the public. That doesn't make sense to me. Even the immigrant communities don't want criminals in their communities. If you're a child predator, if you've got 10 DUIs, do you want a person in the community? Immigrant communities feel the same way. They don't want these criminals back in their communities. And the irony of these type of policies, sanctuary policies, they actually serve to stroke more fear in the immigrant community. And let me explain. I got a letter from like 12 congressmen, 12, 14 congressmen, about my reprehensible statements in response to the California sanctuary law. Because what I said was that I have no choice but arrest people in neighborhoods and at work sites. Let me explain my statement, which I explained to them 100 times. I explained to the people that created this sanctuary policy before they actually made it a law. When I go to a jail, my officers go to a jail, they're going to arrest a public safety threat. That's why they're in jail. These people, number one, they're in the country illegally, which means they already committed one crime against this country by entering illegally, and yet they committed another crime against a citizen of this country. Now they're sitting in the county jail. This is a person illegally in the United States in violation of federal law that's currently in a county jail, which they're probably not a choir boy. They're in a county jail. And there's county jails that will not allow my officers in those jails. And this law don't allow us to, don't honor our detainers, don't allow us to process an individual. Which means what? Which means when he gets released from the jail, back into the community, my job is to locate him and arrest him. It's a public safety issue. Now it does a couple things. Arresting somebody in the privacy and security of a county jail is safer for my officers because they're in a county jail. We know they don't have weapons or behind the wire. It's safer for the alien to be arrested in a county jail because there's not going to be all this emotion when we have to arrest them in the street. It's safer for the community because a public safety threat isn't running around the community. That makes sense. Arrest the criminal inside of a county jail. Safe, secure. But when sanctuary cities release them, my officer has to knock on the door. And anybody in law enforcement will tell you this most dangerous part of law enforcement is knocking on the door of a criminal on his turf where he has access to who knows what. So when I made the statement, by passing this law and not allowing us unfettered access to your jails, what you have done is forced my hand. Now I have to go to their homes, which is not only a public safety issue and an officer safety issue. It puts we got to knock on the door, which does a couple things. In the jail, I'm going to arrest the bad guy, the criminal. When I go to the home and find that bad guy, he's probably going to have other people with him who may have immigration issues. Well, the new executive orders say no one's off the table. My job is to take them in custody too. So those politicians that chose to make a political statement over that of public safety, that want to tell the community, sanctuary cities protects the community from ICE. Wrong. Because now you just put all these people who weren't on my radar on my radar. Because when we go to home or a place of business, we're going to find others. That is a misconception, an intentional misconception, mismessaging by these politicians that sanctuary cities protect the communities. They don't, because I'm going to do my job. There is no sanctuary from federal law enforcement. They can call themselves sanctuary cities all they want. My officer is going to do the job. So if you think about, if that's really the message to protect the immigrant community, why would they want, let's put it this way, more officers in jails means less officers in the communities. That's just simple math. But that's something you won't read in the media. So for me to make a statement that you're forcing my hand to do more operations in neighborhoods and worksite, you can call it anything you want. That's just fact. And you have forced my hand to do that. So are you stoking fear in the immigrant community? Are politicians in the media stoking fear in the immigrant community saying ICE conducts raids, sweeps? We arrest people at churches, hospitals, and schools? When we don't? We don't conduct raids. We don't conduct sweeps. We conduct targeted enforcement operations. The fine men and women at ICE who are professionals. When they go to arrest somebody, they know exactly who they're going to arrest. They know exactly where they're going to find them based on a lot of investigative work and intelligence work. We just don't randomly go in the neighborhood and start looking for people different than us. For people that say that, that they're racist and white supremacists, we removed people to over 140 countries last year. Many Latino and many not. enforcing the laws. So when the story's out, ICE conducts raids, ICE does a neighborhood sweep. No, we conduct target enforcement operations. We know exactly. We don't go through neighborhoods. We don't set up roadblocks. We don't arrest people at churches, hospitals, or schools. Do we arrest people near a school? Absolutely. You required one press release a while ago that we arrest somebody dropping his daughter off at school. We arrested someone dropping his daughter off at school, several blocks from the school, after he dropped his daughter off, after the officers verified there was a mother there to receive a child in the day. Officers take great care of what they do. And when you got a sanctuary cities policy, you can't arrest somebody in jail. Then you got these groups like ACLU and others that want to tell people, don't open your doors to ICE, don't cooperate, don't answer the questions. So we can't arrest them in the jail. We can't arrest them at their homes because they won't open the doors and cooperate with us because they've been trained not to. What option does that leave us? It means we got to wait till they leave. And when you're in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, chances are when you pull that car over, you're within a block or two of a school or a church or a hospital. The fact is we have a sensitive location policy. We don't arrest people at hospitals, schools, or churches without prior approval from headquarters, my office. And it has to be a significant issue, a significant public safety issue and national security issue to do that. That's the facts. But you won't read that. It's a continued vilification of what we do because people don't agree with what we do. People have a right to their opinion. You want open borders, that's your right to your opinion, but don't vilify the men and women of ICE who are strictly following their oath, the oath that they took to enforce the laws of this great nation. This is the greatest country on the face of the earth. You can't want to be a part of this country and not respect its laws. You can't have it both ways. Sanctuary cities is not the America I grew up in. For politicians in jurisdictions and states and cities and localities to choose to intentionally shield those who are in the country illegally and yet commit another crime, and they're sitting in a taxpayer-funded jail, to not give access to a federal law enforcement officer who's charged with enforcing those laws, to me is un-American. Not in America I grew up in. We all should be on the same side to protect public safety, because no matter how they want to spin it in their op-eds, releasing public safety threats in their community does not make sense, and it increases public safety threat. Sanctuary cities also entice more illegal entry. Sanctuary cities are alien smugglers' best friend. If I'm a criminal organization, I smuggle people in this country, what a sales pitch. Hey, I'll get you to Chicago or Los Angeles, and you can even get arrested. And they're not going to work with ICE. Great place to be. You don't think alien smuggling organizations are using that as an enticement? So sanctuary cities are a danger to public safety. They're a violation of federal law. They entice more illegal behavior. More deaths will occur because of this. People are dying entering this country. I've had a long story career, and people say, why are you so heartless and rude, and you want to arrest all these people? Look, if you've seen what Tom Homan's seen in 33 years, you would understand my emotion when we talk about this issue. I was a Border Patrol agent and found dead aliens on the trail that were abandoned by the smugglers. These smugglers don't care. They're up to make a buck. They don't care about the safety and well-being of these people, most vulnerable people. I was here in headquarters on detail when the Victoria incident, 19 dead aliens in back of a tractor trailer. I was actually in Dallas giving a speech to the IACP. And I got a phone call to get on a plane and go immediately to Victoria, Texas to lead the investigation, 19 dead aliens in back of a tractor trailer. I immediately got on a plane and went down there. The crime scene was kept secured until I got there. I actually walked into the back of that tractor trailer and was surrounded by 19 dead aliens laying around me that suffocated in the back of the tractor trailer. One, a 5-year-old boy. That haunts me to this day, because I had a 5-year-old boy at the time. What do you think that 5-year-old child went through the last 30 minutes of his life? What do you think the father who was holding that child went through the last 30 minutes of his life knowing he put his child in that position and couldn't change it? And they're suffocating to death in the back of this black, hot tractor trailer. The alien smuggling organization didn't care about that. What do you think they went through? When I was sent to Phoenix, Arizona and run Operation Ice Storm, we rescued hostages all the time. Women were raped, children were molested. I remember we did one investigation. We rescued a hostage. We got into the house, and he was in a closet, totally wrapped up in duct tape. entire face and everything. He had a hole poked in here and a straw so he could breathe for days. So when people say that I'm cold and heartless, you haven't seen what I've seen. We got to stop. We got to end this stuff. This president is taking it seriously. Call us anything you want. I got thick skin. I can take it. But we're not going to be bullied and not enforcing this law. It is working. What this president has done is working. The numbers don't lie. Does the system need to be fixed? Absolutely. That's Congress's job. That's the legislative branch. But it's working. We got to stick with it. What we sent up the Hill last week, the policies we're asking for to continue doing what we're doing are something we think we need to fix this entire system. People say they want to, when you talk about sanctuary cities, not only does it entice people to hire these criminal organizations, puts people at risk, and they will continue dying entering this country. You're bankrolling the criminal organizations that smuggle these people. Let me explain something to you. These organizations that smuggle illegal aliens are the same organizations that will smuggle weapons, smuggle dope, drugs, and smuggle people that want to do harm to this country. It's the same illicit pathways. People control, the drug cartels in Mexico, they control their pathways and their areas. You're not going to do any illegal activity in that area to pass through that area unless you're going to pay a tax. They control all of that. So by these sanctuary cities putting people more at danger and making this dangerous journey, enticing people to make that journey, putting the public safety at risk because you're releasing public safety threats to the community, you're also bankrolling criminal organizations that want to do harm to this country. People say you want to focus, they want us to focus. I hear all the time, why don't you do what the last administration did and focus just on the criminals? Okay. Focus on criminals, but don't allow me in the county jails. Right? Think about it. These politicians are suing the Trump administration for threatening to hold funding from sanctuary cities. They don't want to fund the border wall to keep them out, but they want to fund sanctuary cities to keep them in. I don't know. The guy's been doing this 33 years. That is backwards. As you can guess, I'm passionate about sanctuary cities. Despite refusal of some politicians to work with us, we are committed to doing our jobs, and we're going to have a positive effect. We already are. Since January 22nd of 2017, we have arrested more than 100,000 illegal aliens in the interior of the United States, which is a 42% increase over the same time period last year. Our issue with detainers is up over 80%. We are now enforcing the laws enacted by Congress that we have sworn to enforce. I told you about the sensitive location policy, churches, schools, and people want to mismessage that we arrest aliens. There's actually a jurisdiction passing laws that we can't arrest people at a school. That stokes fear because we don't do it. So you're creating a law telling us we can't do something we don't do. There's a message behind all that. Courthouse arrests. I take a beating in a courthouse. How dare we arrest a criminal alien in a criminal courthouse? Think about that. Now, I've been in court where I've seen fathers arrested for failing to pay child support. The judge said, you haven't paid child support in 6 months, marshal, take them into custody. I've seen people taken into custody in a courthouse for failing to pay child support. You don't tell me a federal law enforcement officer can't take custody of a criminal inside of a criminal courthouse? And people say, well, he has a right. He has a right to answer charges in due process. Yeah, he has an obligation to that state or local court. He also has an obligation to a federal court that already ordered him removed that he ignored. And when we arrest somebody at a courthouse, we don't arrest them in a courtroom. We arrest them outside. Yeah, do your business. We'll be out here waiting on you. And we'll arrest them in a non-public setting. And when we go to the courthouse, it has to be a last option. They have to be a public safety threat. And we can't get them anyplace else to be tried. So will we continue to arrest people at courthouses? Absolutely I will. It's a public safety threat. I'm not going to let them walk out of a criminal courthouse back into the public. That's not what we do. That's not what this country is about. You know, when I testified on the Hill, and people want to beat me up with statements I made, why do you want to arrest people at courthouses? Well, When I went up the Hill to testify that time, I walked through security. They got metal detectors. They got security guards everywhere to protect congressmen and their staffs. You go in the courthouse, they got a metal detector. They got security guards. Why? To protect the judge and his staff. Why should I not want the same thing for the men and women of ICE? If I can arrest somebody in a safe setting like that, why wouldn't we? They're already putting themselves in harm's way every day, but we want to increase it now? Okay, don't go any place where it's safe for you. We want to just arrest people where it's more dangerous. Common sense. So as far as courthouses, I won't apologize for arresting people in courthouses. We're going to continue to do that. Combined with border apprehensions data from U.S. Customs Border Protection, it's clear that the administration priorities are working. You read the numbers. We're an historic low on the border. We also made a priority to enforce laws against MS-13. Criminal gangs is a priority. There's also executive order on that. Transnational criminal organization we take very seriously. MS-13, we're going to take them on. I've been on media. I actually went with the president to New York City to do a presentation up there. We arrested over 4,200 gang members already, and many of them MS-13. And so the focus is on criminal gangs, but MS-13 will higher priority because they're vicious. Very violent gang. And what we're going to do is we're going to arrest them, send them to prison, and when they're done there, we're going to remove them, send them back to El Salvador or wherever they're from, if they're here illegally. If there's not enough evidence to prosecute them criminally, and they're here in the country illegally, we're still going to send them back to where they belong. It's the right thing to do for the safety of this nation. And we're not looking just to arrest them and remove them. We want to dismantle the entire organization. We have offices in over 40 countries across the globe. We have an office in San Salvador. We work very closely with El Salvadorian law enforcement officials. We actually arrested over 53 MS-13 gang members there last month. We're going to dismantle this organization. We're going to start at the command and control structure in El Salvador and dismantle the entire organization. So we're not just talking about arresting them, we're talking about doing away with MS-13. You know, we work closely, in all my comments, I want to make something clear. The street officers, the law enforcement officers on the front line of cities and states, they want to work with us. Believe me. I've talked to many of them. These are the politicians making these decisions. The California Sheriff's Association, they came out against the latest sanctuary law in California. If you think about sanctuary, I get back to sanctuary because it just irritates me. Chicago, Illinois, highest crime rate in the history of that city. More gun deaths in the history of that city. It's a plague, right? Are they doing everything they can to protect the citizens of that city? No. Because ICE officers aren't allowed in Cook County Jail. They don't share any information with us. They don't honor retainers. So for whatever that percentage is of criminals that are in the country illegally that enter Cook County Jail, they're going to get released right back in the community to go reoffend. Anybody can Google recidivism rates. 50% of those released criminals will commit another crime within the first year, over half of them. 3/4 of them will reoffend within 5 years. So the city of Chicago has chosen politics over public safety. Out of their war they declared on immigration enforcement, they're willing to release criminals back into the community rather than to work with the Department of Homeland Security. I don't know, I've been doing this a long time, to be at a place where a sworn law enforcement officer cannot walk into a county jail to talk to somebody that's in the United States illegally and committed yet another crime in a taxpayer-funded facility does not make sense to me. So I want to tell you that law enforcement, the sheriffs, they want to work with us. So I'm not here to vilify the fine men and women that strap a gun to their hip every day and enforce the laws. They want their community safe too, but their hands are being tied in many areas across the country. The other day we talked about, one of the presenters talked about 287G program, 287G program where law enforcement agencies come to us, they want to help us. We send them to training, we teach them how to process people, identify people that are foreign-born. We do it in a jail setting, so it's like a force multiplier. We train this law enforcement officer, so when they sit at their county jail and people come through, they'll screen everybody, 100% screening, and once they find somebody here illegally, they'll process them. They're supervised by an ICE officer. It's a force multiplier. And again, these law enforcement agencies want to protect the public safety. They want to work shoulder to shoulder with us. We have already doubled those agreements under this president, and we'll triple those agreements by the end of the year. So that's been a meaningful positive, again, under this president. It's just numerous positives as far as public safety under this president. So the executive orders also ask for us to expand these agreements. We already done, like I said, we're going to triple them by the end of the year. I just went to Texas about 2 months ago and signed 18 agreements in one day with local sheriffs there. So you got 18 sheriffs, and I want to step up. Not only do I want to work with you all, I want some immigration authority. Then you got places like California that don't want anything to do with the 287G program, and they want to stonewall you, even doing your own job. That's the dynamics we're looking at. As far as detainers, legality, non-legality, we used detainers for over 50 years. It wasn't a problem. All of a sudden, it's a problem. And there was a court decision in Oregon, but there was just a recent court decision in the Fifth Circuit saying they're legal. But while this is in judicial and they want to argue in the courts over detainers, there's no harm in the law enforcement jurisdiction saying, you know what, maybe we won't honor your detainer, but we're going to call you before we release them. I won't hold him a minute past I would normally hold him on our charges, but we're going to let you know when he gets released you can be here and arrest him. That doesn't put them in any harm's way. But sanctuary cities refuse to do that too, even though they have no liability there, but they refuse to do that. I'm almost done. We're working with DOJ on a lot of things against sanctuary cities. I think we should file suit. We're working with DOJ on hiring more attorneys. We're already hiring more immigration attorneys to make the system go faster. We're increasing the number of ICE personnel in foreign countries, in Central America and Europe. We want to push the borders back. Then Secretary Kelly used to say, I'd rather play the away game than home game. I'm all for it. Let's stop these people, stop these criminal organizations to do what they do where they start. So if we can stop an organization in say, in Salvador, if we can stop them in Mexico before they get to our shores, because once they get to our shores and they cross the border and they claim fear, credible fear or asylum, they're here for a long time while we go through that whole process. And if you look at the numbers in Central America, it's claiming fear in the last couple of years has skyrocketed. That's why immigration courts have over 600,000 case backlog. And what's a shame is that once the cases are heard, most of them won't get it. We're taking advantage of a system with a low threshold. And the backdrop of that is there are people in this world that really need our sanctuary, that are really in fear of political asylum. And they get caught up in this whole process because people are clogging up the system with frivolous claims. So, and that's part of the policy we set up on the Hill also. We need to look at the whole political asylum spectrum and have meaningful thresholds so people can't take advantage of it. Another thing this president has done, we used to have over 26 recalcitrant countries. These are countries who refuse to take back their people. And we have a Supreme Court ruling that we can only detain for 6 months. So if they don't give us a travel document in 6 months, they've got to be released to reoffend. These are some serious criminals. Went to 26, we're down to 11 or 12 now. And we just sent notices to these countries saying, you better change your ways or we're going to look at visa sanctions. This president has taken this on headstrong, and we're making progress. So we have less recalcitrant countries, and we're actually doing visa sanctions against countries that don't cooperate with us. These people are their nationals, it's their citizens. They have a responsibility to take them back. They're not supposed to be here. They've been ordered to remove them, and we need to remove them. And this president takes that seriously. We also asked for changes in certain court decisions in the Ninth Circuit. Surprising. You know, consequence to deterrence is meaningful for illegal. Illegal activity will decrease if there's a consequence to deterrence to that activity. We all learned that as kids, and I truly believe that. When we had this surge of families in FY14 coming across the border, once we built family detention, numbers doubled. They had a court decision, you can only hold them for 20 days. Let's go back up. I mean, that's cost doing business. Come to ICE facility, we'll feed you, clothe you, give you a vaccination, stay in custody 3 days, go out, never show up in court. What was done it? Then I did an Operation Border Guardian, Border Resolve. We went and targeted those families that had the final order removals. Again, for the families, I get it. I don't have to feel good about it. They got a final order from the judge. We got to execute those orders. When we did that, took a beating in the media, but guess what? The numbers went down again. So when there's consequence to deterrence of illegal activity, the numbers go down, which we're currently doing. I guess my overall message today is, under this president, we are enforcing the laws the way they're meant to be enforced. Enforcing laws enacted by Congress, and it's had a significant impact on crossings on the border. The family units and the children are still higher than we want them to be. That's because we got courtrooms that kind of tie our hands, but we're looking to address those. The TVPRA, Trafficking Victims Protection Act, had a good intent. But that's even being abused now by people that want to come and claim, you know, the UACs, and they're escaping violence. One of the things we're doing, if you're a parent or a sponsor that pays a criminal organization, put your child in custody of a criminal organization, smuggle them up through Central America and Mexico, only to be released by you, and you can hide in the shadows, continue to hide in the shadows, because a lot of these parents and sponsors are illegal aliens. We're going to put them in immigration proceedings. We actually just finished an operation. We're going to continue. The first phase of it, we just finished. We want to prosecute them, first of all, for being involved in alien smuggling activities. And second of all, if they have an immigration issue themselves, we're going to put them in immigration court and take them out of the shadows. To me, if this 8 or 9-year-old is truly escaping fear and persecution in his homeland, that parent should be standing shoulder to shoulder with him in immigration court and plead their case. I call that parenting. And as far as the family units, we're looking for some good judicial rulings in that. Again, let me explain something, because I want to be clear. Do I feel bad about the plight of some of these people? Do my officers feel bad about the plight of some of these people? Absolutely we do. Law enforcement sees terrible things. I share a few things I've shared with you. But every state, local law enforcement officers see terrible things every day. Whenever they take a child away from the parent, or the domestic abuse issue, you know, families get destroyed over that, and the officer's there, and he's got to arrest somebody, take somebody, because officers feel bad. They have hearts. I mean, I'm a father. I mean, do I feel bad about the plight of some of these people? Yes, I do. But I got a job to do. And if we don't do that job, it's only going to get worse. So if those people that think ICE officers are heartless and cold and this press statement ruthless, shame on them. They don't understand the men and women that work for me, their fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters too. I'm not asking anybody to cut us slack. What I'm asking for is a little recognition for the men and women of ICE that have a difficult job and put their own safety at risk every day for this fine nation. With that, I want to end. Thank you.
We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions before we have to run. Would you raise your hand, and would you, boy, lots of hands. Where are the microphones? Oh, I don't know. Right here in the front. If you would tell us who you are, please.
I'm Charlotte Cuthbertson from the Epoch Times. Hopefully you can read our headlines as well, and they won't be so bad.
Epoch Times.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you about the unaccompanied minors and the family units. The numbers have obviously come up. You addressed it a little bit with the anti-trafficking, but until a congressional change takes place, is there anything that you can do? Because I know that especially the unaccompanied minor program is looked at as a recruiting pipeline for MS-13 in particular. So can you talk about that a little bit?
What we're going to do, they'll get their due process, family units, UACs, but when we get final orders, we're going to execute those orders. And so we have a surge operation that we just finished, one, where we arrested like 600, but we're going to continue that. Regardless of your family or USC, once you've had your due process and a federal judge order removed, we're going to take those orders seriously and take those people in custody and remove them. That's what we have to do. Because once people in Central America say, okay, well, there's no free pass in the U.S., if we lose our case from an immigration judge, we're coming home. Hopefully they won't sell their ranch. They sell everything they own to pay this criminal organization money to get here, only to be sent back home. So there's a lot of messaging going on in Central. We've got enforcement here that we're stepping up to send a message. There's no free pass. You're going home. We got messaging in Central America on just that. And then Secretary Kelly had a seminar in Miami. He invited officials from the Central American countries called Security and Prosperity, trying to let those big businesses invest in the Central American countries, promote opportunities down there. So we're hitting it from both sides, both from the enforcement side and trying to help those countries take care of their own people. So that's what we're doing. And again, when there's a consequence to deterrence, when we actually put a plane full of families on a plane, return them, it's meaningful. So people may think about, before they put themselves in harm's way and spend their life savings giving them to a criminal organization, let's not make that trip.
Got time for one final question in the back, with the salmon shirt.
I think it's red, but
please tell us who you are.
Mark Krikorian, Center for Immigration Studies. The one thing you didn't talk about, Mr. Homan, was worksite enforcement. And I know there's bureaucratic issues within ICE about that sort of thing, and there was that great announcement about the Asplund tree company getting this huge fine, but are we going to see a resumption of routine worksite enforcement?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I must have missed it. I got like 8 pages of stuff here. Yes, the panel is right. Unless you remove the magnets, as long as they think they can come here and have a U.S. citizen kid and not get removed, they're going to keep coming. As long as they come here and get a job, they're going to try to come. So we are stepping up worksite enforcement. I actually just recently looked at how much time, what percentage of time is spent by Homeland Security investigation worksite enforcement. I just gave an instruction. I want to increase that by 4 to 5 times what they're currently doing. So we're taking worksite enforcement very hard this year. We've already increased the number of inspections and worksite operations. You're going to see that significantly increase this next fiscal year. Not only, but we'll do a little different than we've done it. Not only are we going to prosecute the employers who knowingly hire illegal aliens, we're going to detain and remove the illegal alien workers.
So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of what I trust you will agree was both an informative and engaging discussion on immigration enforcement. Please join me in thanking Thomas Holman for coming and sharing the stage with us.